Hello, everyone, and welcome to What Do You Believe? I'm happy and excited that you guys are watching, and feel free to email us or send your comments or notes or any questions that you have to our email address. And Hadi, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We're happy and excited to have the next generation, I guess, because now I don't know what generation I'm in, but the next generation, and we're happy to hear your questions and all your comments. And thank you for being here, Dr. Nagy.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Nagy Eskandar is a medical doctor, and he's the fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons of England. He practiced surgery for 25 years in the UK, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you, David.
Doctor, we've talked about the flood of Noah, we've talked about the ark, and we've talked about the impact of the flood on geology, and we want to keep going with geology.
Exactly, because if we understand the catastrophic geology of the ark, we'll be able to understand the layers of the crust of the earth differently from the uniformitarian way of understanding. Uniformitarians believe that everything happened with the same rate that we see now. So if the continents are shifting from each other, say 1 meter a year or something, and the distance is miles and miles, it needs millions of years to happen. We believe in the catastrophic geology of the flood, which breaks the crust of the earth and divides this very rapidly. Like the tsunami that happened in Southeast Asia, it moved islands within hours. It doesn't need to have the same rate. So it depends on the forces acting on the matter. So we are talking about Noah's flood and the effect of the flood, because it was a catastrophic event, lasted for 371 days. The fountains of the deep were opened, the subterranean water came out, and lots of changes happened, and massive amount of mud was shifted from one place to another. So if we understand the flood as it is written in the Bible, we'll be able to understand the life we live in differently. So we looked at rapid deposition of layers. As we can see on the screen, there is lack of erosion between the surfaces. If they are exposed for millions of years, there should be some layers, some erosions in between. The other thing we looked at is soft sediment deformation, and this is very interesting in the Grand Canyon. This is the rock which is bent on itself, and there are no fraction lines, because you can break rocks, but there will be a fracture line. But this is a soft material which was subjected to a pressure that caused it to bend by itself when it was soft. So it is a rapid process. It is not something that needs millions of years. It was called Bright Angel's Shale in the Grand Canyon, and I visited that place myself. And this is Tom Vail, was the leader actually of our team. And this is how this rock is formed. You can see the bending of the rock. See the size of the person, see the direction of the bend of that rock. That means it was soft when it is formed, and under pressure, acute pressure and temperature, it caused it to take that shape. So the other feature that we confirmed the rapid deposition is lack of disturbances at interface. Interface is the place between the different layers. If they are exposed for millions of years, that means there will be drops of rain, and there will be some plants coming in between the layers, like this picture here. Living ocean bottom ecology. You find in the ecology that there are some plants and some seeds will come on the exposed surface and start to grow. So if these layers are exposed for millions of years, as the uniformitarians believe, that means you will find these features in between layers, but you don't. So that means it is deposited very quickly. Yeah.
Would the plant growth happen even into the stone layers of
Yes.
the sedimentary?
Yeah, that can happen very easily. If you visit, I live in Scotland, and you go for walks and you find a tree coming out of a rock. Because if there is life, it can make its way out. So yes, I'm saying big trees actually. But what we are talking here about just vegetations and small plants coming in between these layers, and they are not there.
Doctor, can you explain more why can that happen over millions of years if it's just, gonna start building up and the rock is gonna start bending and it's just gonna take its time to go? Because if you're saying like it makes more sense for it to happen once very quickly, but it can't just develop, and just start moving, or does rock grow to actually keep moving and doing these shapes?
Yeah. If the rock is solid, right, and you can break it by massive amount of force. You can break the rock, but you'll have a fracture line. Yeah? What we were explaining is a soft rock which was bent. That's an acute position. It's not millions of years. It doesn't take millions of years just to bend and be soft, right? So it is soft, and when it is soft and bent that way, that means it is an acute event. It is a quick deposition and quick action on that rock. It doesn't take millions of years to bend it gradually, because if you do that, it will come to a point when it breaks, and there will be a break line. We don't have a break line here. And if the surface is exposed for millions of years, that means changes will happen. Ecology will change on the surface of that rock. And then another area will be deposited upon it. Another rock will deposit and keep going. We find that the surfaces in between these rocks are smooth. And they claim there are 5 million years in between. So if there are really 5 million years, these 5 million years will leave an imprint on the surface of that rock. Why are we going through all of this? Really, it is to understand the world from the biblical lens, biblical point of view, and to understand the catastrophic event of geology, because that will explain the layers and explain the fossils. The fossils, as we studied before, doesn't need millions of years to form. It's an acute event depending on the conditions that this animal or this plant finds itself in. And I showed you a picture of a hat, which was fossilized in about 50 years because it was immersed in a solution which is full of minerals, and under pressure and temperature, it is fossilized. So lots of people say, oh, the Bible is not accurate because the mountains are millions of years old. The fossils are millions of years old. We need to challenge this idea, and we need to understand how fossilization takes place and how the mountains are formed. As I said, there are different types, but the two main types is sedimentary rocks. That means sediment after sediment after sediment. And there is something called igneous rocks, which is volcanic eruption. And from the lava, when the lava is very soft and very fluidy, till it becomes fully crystallized, that's the age of the rock. And that's when you apply the potassium, argon, and other radiometric datings that we're going to use to explain and to see if it is accurate or not.
So like the fossils we've talked about, it's more likely to happen quickly under certain conditions. You're saying also for geology, the rocks and the forming of the rocks, it's more likely to happen faster because, you know, it's smooth, it's layers that we can see that there isn't any erosion, nothing is happening, nothing lived on there for like millions of years.
Yes, exactly. That's absolutely right, actually, David. And it's important to understand this because I remember I was chatting to a friend of mine who's an atheist, and I was talking about the Bible, and she said to me, oh, we can't deny the age of rocks. I said, I'm not denying the age of rocks, but I'm going to discuss how this is formed. So we are not denying anything. We love science as Christians and as creationists. We believe in science. That's operational science, obviously. And if we apply the operational science, you will find a different picture completely, looking at the same facts like the Grand Canyon. Yeah.
Through information given in the Bible, can we approximate how old the Earth actually is?
Right. If you look at the Bible and you calculate from the creation of Adam, and you look at the genealogy, that is the family tree from Adam till Abraham, there's about 2,000 years. From Abraham to Christ, about 2,000 years, and now we are 2018. So that means we are talking about 7,000 years of age. That's completely different from millions of years, because they believe, according to the Big Bang theory, that the singularity, the small point where the energy and matter will concentrated and condensed, is about 13.8 billion years. Billion is 1,000 million. So there's a big difference because it depends on your starting point. They believe that the Earth is about 4.5 billion years. And they believe that the water started in the oceans 3.8 billion years. And then they believe that life started as a simple cell in water and came out. So that's completely different structure than the creation model. That's why people trying to mix both, really, they will never satisfy either camp. Really, they cannot. Because if you say God guided the evolution, The evolution say, no, it's an unguided process. As we have seen in the previous episodes, actually, Hadi, we have seen a quote from Richard Dawkins saying the natural selection is a blind force. It doesn't see the consequences. It doesn't know the end product. That's completely different from the creation event. I'm not saying creation story because it's not story. It is the creation event. God created because God is powerful and almighty. He can create from nothing. So back to the geology again. So the lack of these changes in the layers between in the Grand Canyon. We use the Grand Canyon because you find most of the layers represented there. It's really an amazing place. But obviously you have geological changes all over the earth. It's not only the Grand Canyon. And the other thing, billion of fossils all over the world. That means there is a universal process that allows them to happen quickly. It cannot happen really with this extensive number, and they are mainly marine fossils. That means there is water covering the earth with that extent. We had the chart, if you remember, a few episodes ago, with 95% of the fossils as marine fossils. And some of them on top of the mountain. How did they come in the top of the mountain? They don't have an escalator to take them up. That means the mountain was covered with water, and the water receded, and this animal died, fossilized quickly, and they are at the top. That makes sense. So we need to trust the Bible. We need to trust the history in the Bible, because this is the basis of what happens next.
Also, like you said, like when we asked about why the flood and why does it matter, now we're starting to see that through like the flood, we can actually explain what happened in geology. Where, like you said, if we walk, at the Grand Canyon, you can actually visibly see the layers, which you said it's happening all over the earth, where we just can't visibly and easily see it that way. So it makes sense to actually start, putting together these pieces to understand what happened and why it happened. And on that note, let's take a break. We'll take a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like a copy of this episode, please call 714-709-4300 or email us at info@alkarmatv.com. You can also visit our website at www.alkarmatv.com. Also, you can write to P.O. Box 3610, Seal Beach, California, 90740.
Welcome back, Doctor. We're talking about geology and the effects of the flood on geology.
Exactly, because as we always say, there are two types to explain geology. Uniformitarian, that means the same slow rate that we see happening now, they believe happened in the past. And they need millions of years for things to happen that way. We believe in catastrophic geology of the flood, which affected all the layers of the earth and the fossilization. So that's a completely different way of thinking. So we're talking that there is no biological changes on the surface of these layers. If they are exposed for millions of years, you must find that. We don't find ripple marks and animal tracks and main tracks. Like if you leave a surface like this, if you see on the screen now, if you leave a surface exposed for a long period of time, you find lots of waves, and you'll find some drops of water causing some holes, and you'll find some deposits. You don't find that between the layers in the Grand Canyon. That means it was not exposed for a long time for this physical phenomena to happen. There is another very interesting reason we believe in the rapid deposition is polystrate fossils. Let me explain that. Polystrate fossils mean there is a fossil across so many layers. So I'll show you a tree trunk, and there is one layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, different layers. You cannot have this tree trunk standing or oblique or straight, and for millions of years one deposit, and then one deposit, and one deposit, because it will decay. So if you have a polystrate fossil, that means a fossil across so many strata layers, that means these layers happen very quickly. Otherwise, the whole thing will rot. It will not be able to survive this deposition. Let me just show you that so it will be easier. There is a quarry near Edinburgh, and that's near the place where I live. And this is just a diagram of a rock, of a tree between the layers. But let me show you the real fossil itself. If you go to Nova Scotia in Canada, you'll find this fossil of a tree. As you can see on the screen here, a fossil of a tree. And you find different types of layers. You can see the different deposits here. If that's taking millions of years, this tree will rot. But it is there, and a lot of layers happened very, very quickly, and that's the catastrophic effect of the flood.
Because trees don't live for millions of years.
No, they don't. And the dead tree, really, the living tree don't, but the dead tree will be even shorter if there is no roots for taking the nutrients and the water and everything. So this fossil is fossilized. That means it is permeated by calcium and magnesium and other elements, causing it to be like a solid rock. Yeah? So that's the fossilization of a tree, because we said fossilization happens to the bones, sometimes to soft tissues, sometimes to a hat, non-living structure altogether. It's a permeation of calcium and other minerals, causing it to be hard, to be like a stone hard. That's the fossilization. And because of that, it doesn't decay. So this tree is here, and you find so many layers, as you can see here. These are different layers. If they are depositing over millions of years, let us start from the bottom end here of that tree, just to explain the idea. This tree was taken from origin. It's just taken up, we believe, through the flood, or a local flood or general flood, and it was deposited among all these sediments coming. These sediments happened very quickly. It didn't take long time, millions of years, for this layer, for example. I'll just use the arrow to explain the layers. So imagine starting this layer to deposit, and after millions of years, another layer, and another layer, and another layer, another layer, and keep going like this. This tree will not be there in between all these rocks at all. It will be decaying. And the polystrata, that means between different layers, strata is a layer. The polystrata fossils, or polystrate fossils, explain that this event is a quick event.
So, Doctor, if we're going to look from a different perspective, how can we explain this if there is no flood?
Yes. What the geologists who don't believe the Bible, they say this is a local event. This is a local flood.
So it is a flood. Like they think it only happens that way if there's a flood and things are moving and it happens quickly.
You need water to bring all the minerals to deposit. So you need a vehicle. You need something to bring this.
So for this, they're not saying it's a millions of years. This happened quickly, but it was just local floods that happened.
But again, they start to say, okay, that is, the water came in and receded, came in and receded, because these layers are given ages of long ages. So if it's a local flood, it's not flooding for millions of years. It is flooding, and some action happens, and some action happens, and you have very interesting explanation for something like this.
Is this type of fossilization a common occurrence?
No, it's not common occurrence now. And that's one of the evidence that the slow rates that we see now, we don't see fossilization happening around us in billions of creatures. We don't see that. So that needs a global event, and it needs a very aggressive event, really, is very strong and massive event. And that's really the flood of Noah. So when you look at the facts, the fact is we have layers and we have a fossil in between them. That's the fact. How you explain the fact, depending on your starting point. Uniformitarians will see it millions of years. Christians who believe the creation events, not story, events of the Bible, will see this is matching the flood of Noah, which is really a different way of thinking. That's why trying to mix both is impossible, actually. Because some people think of theistic evolution, as I said before, thinking God guided the evolution to bring all the animals and humans at the top. Actually, this position will not satisfy the evolutionists because they say it's an unguided process. It doesn't satisfy the Bible because the Bible said there was no sin. The Bible says there is no death before the sin of Adam. So, two different parallel lines, really. And we have to know what starting point you are starting with, because that determines how you see the facts in front of your own eyes. So let us go to Mount St. Helens in Washington, the state of Washington, in May 1980. This mountain erupted, and this is the massive eruption that happened in the volcano in the Mount St. Helens. And this is the crater that was produced. So the dotted line represents the mountain, and that's the effect of the force of the volcanic eruption causing this cavity and forming a canyon, actually, a small canyon, not at the scale of the Grand Canyon, but it formed a canyon. Now, they took lava. Now we are talking about igneous rock. That's different from the sedimentary rocks that we were talking about. Now, this is igneous rock. What it means is lava coming from the eruption, and this lava is fluid, hot fluid. When it is fully solidified and crystallized, that's the age of the rock, from when it was solid, when it was fluid like lava, and becoming fully crystallized. That's what's called the age of the rock, okay? Now, they took lava from this eruption, and they sent it to the laboratory to say how old this mountain is, how old this lava is. So the radiometric age came as 340,000 to 2.8 million years, right? The exact time, the actual time of forming of this lava to fully crystallized is 12 years. Why this big discrepancy? Because the calculation of the radiometric isotopes depends on assumptions. Assumption of the original material, how much is there, the rate of decay, and the residual amount of what we call daughter product. So the parent product and daughter product. We'll have a little film to explain that again. But what I'm trying to say here is, this is a mountain which is formed before our own eyes. We have seen it, it's formed within 12 years, very short time. When you took samples and you send it to ordinary labs, these are not Christian labs, they are not believers working there. It is people, scientists who are looking at the material and examining what is in it. So they came as radiometric dating age is 340,000 years to 2.8 million years, and the actual age is 12 years.
How was it found out that the actual age was 12 years?
Because you can see it in front of your eyes. You have the date of the eruption of the mountain on the 18th of May, 1980, and then you see the mountain in front of your eyes within 12 years.
And then they did the test and still discovered that the dating was wrong.
Yes, they did the test. They sent the sample not knowing the age. They didn't tell them that this is 12 years old, right? So they sent the sample to them and say, please examine this rock and tell us how old that rock should be.
So they didn't know that just happened, or they knew and they still got it wrong?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of confusing. Because it's a huge difference between a million year and 12 years.
It is. And even the thing is, no, they given the samples to the lab with unknown age. They didn't tell them, definitely. Otherwise, you will have a bias in your examination. I'd just like to comment on something. The range that's given is in itself massive. There is a difference between 340,000 to 2.8 million. So which one is right? I'll go for the younger age or the older age? The 340,000 or the 2.8 million? Which one is right? Is the truth something in between? Is the truth in the extremes? So that range in itself tells us there is a problem. And that applies the Big Bang when they started. We'll talk about the Big Bang in detail, but when they started talking about the Big Bang, they said it's 15 billion to 20 billion. Now they reduce it to 13.7, and now they talk about 13.8. So it's very easy to add a couple of millions just to get things right. So these figures, we have to take them with understanding how they are calculated. The problem is we take this as this is the gospel truth. That's what it is. We don't discuss when they say, oh, evolution is so evident. If you don't believe it, you are really, really behind time. What is the evidence? Bring the evidence. Let us discuss the evidence. And this is one of the examples, really, the age of the rock. That's why we're spending time in this program to discuss geology. What is geology going to do with our practical life every day? Really, we think it's very little, but it's actually a lot. Because if we understand the world from the catastrophic event of the flood, and the flood is real, it's not a myth, it is not a story.
Well, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Hattie. C.S. Lewis wrote once, "If I find in myself desires which nothing in this world can satisfy, the only logical explanation is that I was made for another world." Think about it. Ask yourself, what do you believe? We'll see you next time.